Welcome back to Fossil Ridge Games. Today I'm going to talk with you about Clank Catacombs, specifically an expansion which is the Lairs and Lost Chambers. I'm going to walk you through the basic rules for this expansion. First, we're going to talk about trophies. Clank Catacombs, the Lairs and Lost Chambers expansion, is going to contain numerous different trophies that you can claim. Predominantly, trophies are going to be associated with killing or slaying a monster. So we have a couple examples of those out on the table. In addition to that, things like devices can also be a trophy. So kind of what does this mean exactly? If we kind of zoom in, we notice that there's text that says trophy. For example, the Venomous Lurker says, while you're in a crystal cave, you can't heal. Well, that's not exactly the best sort of special ability, but at the end of the game, it's going to give you 1 victory point when you tally up the amount of points that you have. So this is kind of a cool concept. Now, what does this mean exactly? The player that defeats this monster is going to take this trophy and they're going to put it face up on the table. And what that means is that it's going to have this sort of permanent special effect in play until the trophy is removed. So as another example, we have the Horde Keeper, and it says trophy. It's going to be worth 1 victory point at the end of the game for every 5 coins that you have, and thus it's going to have a variable sort of point total. So this trophy is going to encourage you to collect coins over the course of the game, because then you can get additional victory points at the end of the game. Next up, we have the Evil Wizard. Here's just another example of a trophy. It says each turn, the first time you play a secret tome, you get to draw a card. The second time, +2 clank and trash this card. So as this thing sits out on the table, you might get a secret tome that comes out. Now, if you all have played Clank enough, you know that the secret tomes are great. They're going to be worth 7 victory points. But guess what? When it comes out into play, it's kind of like a null card. It doesn't really do anything for you. You can't move, you can't fight, you can't buy any other cards with it. So this is kind of an interesting condition. And it kind of favors, hey, if you do have secret tomes in your draw deck, you actually get to draw a card, so you're kind of like replacing the tome almost. So it gives you a bonus, but the second time you do it, you get +2 clank, and then you lose this. So this is kind of an interesting mechanic, and it kind of favors you getting, like, you know, maybe a few secret tomes, but if you get a ton of them, it's going to kind of almost punish you. And then finally, we have devices that can also act as trophies. And this one is also secret tome related. It says, while you have a secret tome in your play area or discard pile, you don't have to stop in crystal caves. That's a pretty amazing ability for you to just simply traverse the crystal caves. And everybody knows that's played Clank. You get stuck in there and it kind of wastes your movement. And it's going to be worth 4 victory points at the end of the game if you have a mastery token. So this is going to really have you focus on getting out of the catacomb alive. Next up, we're going to talk about the sort of meeples that they added to the game. So as you can see kind of at the top of the screen, we have what's called a lair, or Lairs. Now, Clank Catacombs, the Lairs and Lost Chambers expansion, is going to have 3 different monster lairs, and I kind of put them at the top. Each one of them is going to have anywhere from 1 to 3 of these wooden pieces. Every single one of these pieces, if you defeat it, so as an example, I'm holding the Sphinx in my hand right now. If this piece is defeated, it's taken by the player that defeats it and goes in their trophy collection. So kind of what that means is that these wooden pieces are kind of like unique trophies that can be claimed by a player if they defeat it. What's cool is you know where the monster is, because once this tile is placed on the board, the associated wooden piece is placed onto the board as well. So you can actively pursue taking and killing this monster as a trophy. So I'm going to go to the back of the rules book for this expansion, and notice that it's going to have descriptions of each of these monsters. It's going to tell you kind of what you need to do to defeat it. So you can see that, you know, you need 3 swords, 2 swords, and 4 swords. For the Medusa, it's a little bit specialized. It says you must play a secret tome during your turn to fight this. So if you don't actually fight the Medusa, it's going to start turning you to stone. And so there's other text over here that tells you how that actually functions. So the Medusa is going to be hard to take out. You actually have to play a secret tome, which means that you have to have purchased one, and then it comes into your hand. Then you have to go into the room, play the secret tome, play your swords to kill this thing. Now what's cool about this as a trophy, and I'll try to zoom in as best as I can, you can get a victory point at the end of the game, but you're going to ignore tunnel monsters, which is absolutely fantastic. So for the rest of the game, you can go ahead and simply ignore the monster icons on the tunnels. That's a pretty huge and massive advantage. So on the left-hand side of this, it's going to describe to you what happens in the lair when you go into it. And then on the right-hand side, it's going to tell you what happens when you claim these monsters as trophies. So I think all in all, the trophy concept is pretty cool. It's going to put almost like a permanent event into play, and it allows you to have maybe different sort of strategy options as you're playing Clank. It's going to maybe force you to kind of look at the game a little bit differently and maybe change up your strategies as you play. All in all, I think the trophy edition is a pretty strong addition to the game. Next, we're going to talk about the Lost Chambers in this expansion, and there's going to be 5 Lost Chambers total throughout this expansion. And notice that all of the Lost Chambers will have a gold border around the room. And I didn't mention this before, but I probably should, so I'll pop this onto the screen. This is a lair, so this is going to be the Medusa lair. So you can see like the wooden piece would fit right here. And lairs are categorized by having this red border around the room, whereas the Lost Chamber is going to have gold borders around the actual room itself. This is kind of a cool addition to the game, and it adds a difference when you're sort of exploring the catacombs. Originally, when you play Catacombs, it gets to be a little bit routine because you're going from room to room, and there's nothing really all that specialized in the game. And especially if you played the original Clank, a lot of this stuff is very, very common. It's just simply different orientations. So what I really like about this expansion is that it adds these additional rooms, and these are kind of like points of interest throughout the dungeon itself. And it allows you to almost go on like little mini quests of some kind, or have really cool interactions in these rooms. So I think that this adds a lot of depth to the game. So what you're going to find, again, in the manual, so I'm just going to go ahead and pop this up. There's a pretty hefty amount of rules that are associated with these rooms. And as you can see, you should really kind of keep this reference handy while you're playing this expansion, both for the Lost Chambers, then obviously then the lairs are on the back page of this manual. Now, all in all, I think that really the first time you go to one of these Lost Chambers, you might have to kind of read the rulebook. If you play this game enough, there's enough iconography actually listed on the room that you can kind of figure it out. So like as an example, here's one of the chambers, and it will give you the ability to do 4 different things. And you can see this kind of, it's like, oh, if I pay 5 coins, I can heal, and then I can draw, you know, one of these tokens. So I think like a lot of the iconography, especially after the first time that you use this tile or interact with it, it will start to become a little bit more routine for you. So here's another example. Here's some of like the iconography that's on this one. So you walk into this room, it's going to give you 5 coins, then you get hit with 2 different Clank. So you're going to take 2 different Clank. It's going to have an artifact place for it. And then obviously you can unlock this right here. And then when you unlock this, it allows you to go either to this room or to this room right here. So as you get more and more experience with playing this, the need for the rulebook starts to dissipate a little bit. Now, why are these tiles important, and how does it really impact the overall game? So what's kind of cool about the Lair and Lost Chambers expansion, it's going to contain a total of 12 new tiles. And if you've played Clank Catacombs enough, you understand that sometimes you don't even get through the normal pile of dungeon cards when you're playing the game. Oftentimes you can get an artifact and then simply get out of the dungeon in time before you're defeated. So a lot of the games you're not actually interacting with all of the rooms. What's cool about this expansion, it's going to add a lot of variability to the game. So by introducing 12 new tiles into the game, you're going to get really a unique feel and theme every time you play this, because you're not always going to get the same tiles. So the other thing that's kind of cool is that although we have these 5 specialized rooms, and then we also have the 3 Lairs, that doesn't mean that you're going to see them every game. So what's going to make this kind of cool is that each game you might have a couple unique rooms that come out into play, and that's going to kind of really change the feel and the theme of that dungeon for that playthrough of Clank. So I think that this is a really strong addition to the game by adding variability to it. I don't really feel that the overall complexity of these tiles is that extreme, especially if you've been playing Clank for a while, specifically Clank Catacombs. I think it's a nice addition. Obviously, it adds a lot of complexity if you've never played Clank before. So if you're trying to get a new player onto the table, I think this is very complex, and it might be a little bit of a difficulty, a little bit of a stretch. Next up, I'm going to walk you through the concept of entry tunnels. So let's say we are playing this green player right here. It's the green player's turn, and they want to move over into this new area over here. We go to the pile of rooms, and we pull this card, and thus we flip it over. Now, when I flip this over, I'm going to see something new, and that's going to be these green colored tunnels. Notice, too, that I have white tunnels as well. So the green tunnels located here and here, these are going to be known as entry tunnels. And what that means is that if I pull this card, I have to attach the corresponding tunnel to one of the green ones. So I don't have the option to go to one of the white tunnels first. So what does that look like when I'm trying to move from here into this new area? What that means is I have to start rotating the tile until I link up with one of the green tunnels. So as an example, I would go ahead and then link the green tunnel to the room that I'm in, and then I would take my wizard piece and move it into this new room. So what you're going to find throughout this is that there are different entry tunnels on these new tiles. So here's another one. Notice that this hallway is locked. So let's say I was moving from here to here, that would put a locked tunnel in my way, but then I could also rotate it this way and attach the green hallway to here. So some of them that have multiple green hallways, it still allows you to flip the tile around a little bit, but it's going to almost sort of funnel you into different parts of this sort of new dungeon. So it's going to kind of force you to go to some of the rooms first as this game progresses. So something else that you're going to see, and there is a tile that we should talk about, and I'm going to just put this one out onto the screen as well. So notice that this has sort of an artifact with a hash mark through it, and this is kind of like, hey, no artifacts. So what's weird about this card is that when you put it down onto the table, I would have to link it to this room because it has a green tunnel. And then the wizard would simply just go down this hallway and then into a new location on this side. Now, if you do have an artifact with you, it means you can't actually move through here by using a boot. So think of this as, hey, if you're a newbie and you're moving through this hallway, that's great. You can just move back and forth through it because you don't have an artifact. But it kind of punishes you later in the game. If you do have an artifact, it says, hey, you can't go through this hallway anymore, and it kind of blocks you from doing that. Now, can you still teleport? Yes. So you could then teleport from this room to, let's say, another room on the other side over here. So we could do that. But it kind of nullifies your ability to move down that hallway. Next up, we're going to talk about pit traps. So we have our nice green player. And the green player is going to move from this room into the next one. And if you notice, there's going to be a pit trap. It looks like a spiky trap. And what that means is that when I move into the room, it's going to cause the pit trap to trigger. So I'm going to take my person, I'm going to move it over to the pit trap. So I can do one of two things when I move into this room. I can simply fall into the pit. And once I do that, I'm going to take 1 point of damage. And then it's going to stop me from moving the rest of the turn. This is going to be like identical to a crystal cavern. I won't be able to use boots to move out of the room, but I can use something like a teleport. Or the other option is that I can evade the trap, and that means I'm going to have to trash something from my hand. And that's kind of something that is going to be a little bit of a pain. And the caveat for that is that the card has to be trashed from your hand Now, the other part of it is you're not allowed to trash a stumble card. And so the stumble card is the obnoxious +1 Clank, and each of your draw decks, when you play Clank, you're going to have 2 of these in your starting hand. So it doesn't allow you to trash this one. Now, trashing is going to be different than discarding. Trashing means it's going to be permanently removed from your draw deck, and not just going into your discard pile. So if you're looking at your hand, it might not be the worst thing to, like, let's say, lose a Burgle, because this is kind of a basic card, and there's really not much going on this card. So what makes this game interesting is that it allows you to kind of prune your hand by using the pit trap with the exception of you can't trash one of these stumble cards. So as you progress through the game, you can fall into pit traps and start kind of purging out your Burgle cards from it, and overall that might strengthen your deck. So there's a little bit of a trade-off. You can take damage, or you can possibly prune your hand right here. The really downside to this is that if it's trashed from your hand, you can't play it and gain the benefit because it doesn't actually go into your play area. So you're going to basically be losing one of your cards overall. The other caveat too is that if you have maximum sort of damage, and in Clank you can take up to 10 wounds before you're defeated. So let's say you have 9 wounds showing and you're the green player, and let's say I'm in this room right here. I can't actually move into here because, like, you know, let's say I would move into the room and it would kill me. I actually can't move into the room. Now I could still move into the room and trash a card from my hand, but if I had basically no cards in my hand and I had 9 damage, I moved into the room, it wouldn't actually allow me to do that because I can't basically kill myself by moving into the pit trap room. So that's one of the sort of like strange caveats behind the pit trap. Our final new rule is going to be what's called a linked one-way tunnel. So there's only a couple of these in the game. So I threw this onto the board as an illustration. So kind of what we're looking at is this card up in this corner. Notice that it has a one-way tunnel going into this lair, and then it has a one-way tunnel going out. I don't think this is too confusing for most players, but I'll just go ahead and go over it. So if I'm the green player and I want to move from this room into this room, I follow the linked one-way tunnel into the room, which means that I have to encounter the 2 monsters in this tunnel and thus pay 2 sword icons or suffer damage. Now, if I move back out of this room, I obviously don't go up the tunnel that I came in on. I have to simply follow this tunnel out. So I follow this and it pops me back into the crystal room. So, like I said, I don't think this is too earth-shattering, but just be aware of, like, newer players, they might get confused with the concept of one-way tunnels. All in all, the Lairs and Lost Chambers expansion for Clank Catacombs is a benefit to the game. It's going to add a host of different sort of points of interest for you to explore in Clank Catacombs. First, you can explore lairs. You can also take trophies from slaying monsters. Next, we have Lost Chambers with really cool special effects. They've also added pit traps, one-way tunnels, and a whole host of cards. So what's kind of interesting about this as well is there's a draw deck of additional 50 cards that you can add into your Clank pile. So this is going to add a lot of variability for monsters to slay, and also different treasure and companions that you can flesh out your draw decks with. I think this expansion is a lot of fun. It makes every single game unique. It basically feels completely unique, especially because the number of tiles now has been increased by 12, so it adds a lot of variability to the game. All in all, I think this is a good expansion, and it was moderately priced. I didn't feel like it was overpriced for what you're getting out of it, which is a lot of fun. I want to thank everybody for joining me today, and as always, have fun gaming.